Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. Currently there's no one in the live stream, but since these videos are put in an archive on YouTube, which anyone can access, I'm just going to open up the video like I would do any other video. So today, right now, it's around midnight Central Standard Time, which for me is actually around the time I eat dinner. I'm nocturnal, but let's not worry about that right now. I'm doing a Q&A. I know some people come in here to ask me some questions about fish and shrimps and snails and what have you. So I decided, alright, I'm going to do a Q&A. Earlier today I did a live stream about a bug zapper. That was just to test out some equipment. I've done some changes with my equipment. As you can see, I'm not holding the camera anymore. I've actually got an attachment for my tripod to hold my camera for me on my tripod. So we got that. So on top of that, let's see here. We got the big old battery and whatnot to ensure I don't run out of power, because I have no idea how long this live stream is going to last. So let me just kind of place my big old battery on the little system here. Plug everything in. So we're just starting up the live stream right now. And good old USB-C cable goes into the phone. And the equipment's all set up. So at this point, you guys are welcome to ask me anything you want about fish, shrimps, snails. If I have the answer, I am happy to share it. Now during this live stream, we're also going to be doing another thing. We're going to be doing two things. The 55-gallon here that I have been cycling for the last few days. We as in my friend and I have been working on it. We cut out some foam to put on the top to keep it insulated so I can crank the heaters up. It's about 89 degrees Fahrenheit in this tank at the moment. The hotter the water is, the faster the bacteria grows on the biological media. So, the bacteria I always choose, and this is not a corporate sponsor or anything, this is my personal choice and recommendation, Seachem Stability. I like this stuff a lot. It has 5 different types of bacteria, nitrifying and denitrifying bacteria for anaerobic and aerobic systems. So that's 4 bacteria right there, and it has a 5th bacteria. It's a facilitative bacteria to help the bacteria grow a little faster. So that's the bacteria I use. As you saw in one of the other live streams, probably not so well, the quality should be better now because I switched over from 5 gigahertz to 2.4 gigahertz, which should give me a better connection through the walls and whatnot up to my wireless access point. I use Fluval Biomax. Once again, not a corporate sponsor or anything, it's just the choice that I go with. We use Fluval Biomax in the filter. I also have a little bit of Seachem Matrix in there, but Fluval Biomax was on sale almost everywhere, so I just decided, why not get Fluval Biomax? It's always been good to me. And you may have seen a video earlier. Got a little mascot, Sammy the Shrimp. It's a little cat toy imported from Japan. I thought it was funny. It looks like all the other shrimps that I breed, so I thought, let's have a mascot. So this is Sammy the Shrimp. Hi, Sam. Say hi to Sammy. So, while I'm sitting here, as I said, you guys can ask me questions. And while I'm doing this live stream, I'm going to be testing the water parameters of the 55-gallon tank. So, I'm going to bring my API master test kit over here. Make sure I get the one with the bottles that are full. Yep, okay. Alrighty then. So, it's been a little crazy down here lately. trying to reorganize a little bit of everything. Cleaning this here and there means putting stuff everywhere. So things are a little messy, as they tend to be. Still haven't found a good day where I can get a bunch of my friends to help me reorganize all the tanks. Because once I do that, I'll have a lot more space down here and it'll look a lot nicer. Much more professional than the kind of ragtag setup I got going right now. So, let's get some testing done. We're going to be testing the ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate using the API Master Test Kit. This is a liquid-based test kit. It's a little more involved than your classic test strips, but it's much more accurate. I gotta be careful because I've already broken 2 of these vials. The nice thing about having an unfinished basement is that water spills dry up really quickly. One of the bad things about an unfinished basement is you drop glass on it and it shatters very easily. So I gotta try to make sure not to do that. It's unfortunate when I lose these, but I have a few of them, so. Anywho, so that means we have to take my makeshift foam top off everything. And we fill these vials up to the white line, which marks 5 milliliters. Going to get 3 of them set up. So get 5 milliliters in each of them. Everyone has a different method for getting them in, or the right amount of water in. I used to use a second eyedropper. So I have a little bit of water in it. And I'm going to try to get as close to the 5 milliliter mark as possible for the sake of accuracy. Alright, so 3 of them in. And we're going to be testing, like I said before, the ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. Put a little foam top back on. Now I do have the glass tops, but here's the weird thing. The glass tops are like a centimeter too long to fit. So I contacted Aquatic about that, and I'm not sure why they were manufactured a little different. Looks like there was a bad batch that got made or something. So I'm waiting on a response from them to see what's going on. But first off, let's go with ammonia, because that is the first thing that happens in your fish tank, because your fish pee and poo, and it creates ammonia in the tank. So we need to measure how much ammonia there is. So we take the, first solution of ammonia, and the second solution goes in after we put the first bit in. And these do require that you shake them quite a bit. One thing I should have done is brought my jigsaw in here, because I usually have a rubber band around these things and I hook it up to the blade of the jigsaw, and the jigsaw moves it up and down really quick, and that shakes these really well. But with these liquid tests, what happens is some of these have a liquid that kind of crystallizes if you don't shake it a lot, and shaking it decrystallizes it and brings it back into a soluble form, into the liquid. And if you don't decrystallize it by shaking it hard, then you will end up getting inaccurate results. This is very particular for the nitrate test. You do got to shake the rest of them, but the nitrate test specifically is the one you need to shake very heavily. So you've got first bottle of ammonia. This takes 8 drops. It's become kind of routine at this point, so try and do it for the camera here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's 8 drops of bottle number 1. Shake it up a little bit. Take bottle number 2. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 drops of that. Keep it in the bottle. And then we have a color. The color won't be the color you need to look at immediately. You're going to have to set this aside, let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes, and then you'll get the color of what it should be. And you compare the color of the vial to the API Master Test Kit's color chart. And I'll show you right here. This is their color chart for the various things that it can measure. So, with ammonia, I would match it up to the center one here to see how much ammonia is in there. Only when you no longer have ammonia and no nitrite, only nitrate, and you can convert 4 to 8 parts per million of ammonia all the way to nitrate with no ammonia or nitrite left, then you're cycled. But it takes time and it takes patience. Setting up a fish tank is not fast. In fact, anything involving fish requires a lot of patience. That is not an option. That is a requirement. Patience. So we got the ammonia test sitting there for right now, getting its color. Next up is the second stage, which is nitrite. Now this would be essentially the second stage because your fish pee and poo create ammonia. Now, the first set of bacteria eats the ammonia and produces its own kind of waste because bacteria is itself a living creature. That bacteria eats ammonia and converts waste in the form of nitrite. So now we have to measure the amount of nitrite. In this bottle, it's 5 drops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put that aside for a minute. Shake the vial a little bit. And once again, we've got a unique color. We need to let this sit for a little bit because we need the chemicals to react with whatever's in the water. So once again, it'll take a little bit of time. But we've got the nitrate test out of the way. And now, the last one, nitrate test. Now these are the bottles you got to shake like crazy. And you see I got a rubber band on them. Normally I have the jigsaw in here and I just have the jigsaw shake everything for me. But that's the thing about these tests is, like I was saying before, particularly the nitrite or the nitrate test contains a substance that, if not regularly shaken or shaken vigorously, will crystallize. And when it crystallizes, it doesn't do its job. So you have to shake it to decrystallize it to turn it back into a soluble material that can be used with the water. So we shake both of them quite vigorously. Hey, what's up, Guppy? How you doing? And yes, I do try to reply to everyone in the live stream. So if you have any questions, like I said in the beginning, but if you're not here for the beginning, feel free to ask any questions about fish, shrimp, snails, what have you. If I have the answer, I'll be happy to help you out. If I don't have the answer, I might know a place where you can find the answer. Hey, how's it going, Junebug? So, we got both nitrate tests shaken up. Right now we're basically doing some stuff. We're testing the water parameters on the 55-gallon here, which is still cycling. So we're on the nitrate part now. So this one's 10 drops of solution in the vial. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's solution number 1. Shake the vial a little. And then part 2 of this test, we add 10 more drops of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. we go. Shake this a little bit, and the nitrate test particularly takes a little while to show its true colors. So once again, we are waiting for the water-based tests, or the liquid-based tests, to sit and react with the water that we have taken samples of from the tank. Well, I don't particularly need a moderator at this point in time. I don't have enough people that come in the live stream that I really think I need someone moderating for me at this moment. So, but if there ever comes a time, I have a few select people in mind that I would consider for that task. But anywho, we have taken the tests. As far as pH goes, I don't actually need to take the test of the pH with the liquid-based tests. I have a digital pH meter that makes things so much quicker. And realistically, the pH stays around 8.3 to 8.4. That's what it comes out of my hose that I use to fill, and that's generally what it stays at. Sometimes the pH in my 40 breeder tank with my guppies can go a little lower because I have driftwood, and driftwood kind of buffers the pH a little bit and brings it down a wee bit, not much. Oh yeah. A lot of people don't realize that filtration for a fish tank has nothing to do with things like carbon, activated carbon, charcoal, whatever. That's people think that the carbon removes the bad stuff, and really that's only there to remove medicine. The real filtration happens with little special, biomass is what I use. Little media that grows bacteria on it, and the bacteria eats the ammonia that the fish eats, or the fish pee and poo creates ammonia. Bacteria eats that, converts it to nitrite. Then there's a second bacteria that eats the nitrite and converts it to nitrate. And when you have nitrite is the least harmful of the substances. So you can have more nitrate build up in the tank than you can ammonia in terms of how toxic it is to your fish. So if you have a completely cycled tank, then you really only need to do a water change, about 20% water change once a week. But yeah, that's how fish tanks actually filter. But it takes time to grow the bacteria. And like I always say, and I'm not sponsored to say this or asked to by Seachem, but I prefer Seachem Stability. Yeah, go ahead, ask whatever question you want, man. That's what the live stream is here for. Really? That's a little inappropriate, don't you think? Some people. Moving along, though. So the tests have been sitting here for a good amount of time now, so I should be able to look at it and see where we're at. First up, we've got the ammonia. And as you can see, the vial is green. If there was no ammonia, it'd be yellow. And I can't exactly show you with perfect accuracy over the camera. But it looks like we're sitting at around 0.5 parts per million of ammonia. So we've still got a ways to go before this tank has enough bacteria on the media to eat up ammonia quickly. Next, we have nitrite. Now, the fact that we have nitrite at all means we do have ammonia that is eating, bacteria that is eating the ammonia, which is good. So if we look at this test right here, it's a pretty deep purple, but not as deep as it could be. We're at about 1 part per million of nitrite, which means we have part of the cycle going. At least half of the cycle is starting to take place. And finally, we have the nitrate. All of the components in the tank. Depends what components you're talking about. This tank's got two 200-watt heaters, 5-stage canister filter, water. There is a UV filter that will help deal with algae and such. And I've got a magnetic algae cleaner right here. But I saw another question. How many liters is the tank behind me? This tank is a 55-gallon tank. I don't know what that converts to in liters exactly, but if you Google it, I'm sure you can get the calculation. So this one's 55 gallons. But moving on, so nitrate. It's definitely orange. If it was yellow, we would have no nitrate, and that would indicate that we have not created enough bacteria that eats nitrite. But we have nitrate, and it's sitting nicely around 10 to 20 parts per million. So we have a cycle going. We just need more bacteria on the media to eat more of the bad, harmful buildup that starts out as fish waste. So every day I come down here, and when I test, if the water does not meet the parameters that I need for it to be a cycle tank, we add a little bit more bacteria. Now the bacteria will multiply on its own, but I choose to add more to speed up the process. There is instructions on the back on how much to add. Just follow those instructions and you should be good. So what I'm going to do is add some more in there, because we still have a bit of ammonia, we still have a bit of nitrite. We need all of that converted to nitrate, which means we got to get the bacteria in there. Now there's plenty of biological media for the bacteria to grow on. It just takes time. So there are live bacterias. Yeah, the live streams are never perfect, and I do apologize for that. For whatever reason, YouTube doesn't let me upload at a rate that I know I could upload. My internet's pretty fast. But this is the problem with live streams. Alright, cool. Well, anywho, besides the fact that I need to get some WD-40 for this chair, because I've listened to my own live streams and I hear this chair squeak a lot. I really hate this chair. Where am I from? I'm from the United States, up in Illinois. So we have some pretty hard water here with a lot of minerals in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this foam top off. Death Valley. Now that's a hardcore metal kind of name for a place to live. Shake up the bacteria, make sure it floats around in solution. And with a tank this big, I'm going to add 2 capfuls. Each cap is actually a measured amount. Believe it or not, that's all I need to add for right now. Because it's a process, it's an ongoing process until it's finished, which will take a while. Seems we have some fun stuff going on in the chat section here. I'm not sure what that's all about. Well then, moving along. So the synopsis is that this tank has been cycling for the last 3 days, I want to say. Can I kick people off the chat? You know, I've never actually tried. But Yeah, it looks like I can kick people, interestingly enough, but I'm not going to kick anyone. I'm going to put them in timeout. That's interesting. So I can put people in timeout. People are being naughty. So, yeah, I have been checking on it for the last few days. Every day I come down here and I check the water parameters and see how it's going along. The two people that were arguing, I decided to put in timeout. I don't know who's in the right or wrong here, but let's just avoid confrontation in general if we can. But anywho, keeping along with the fishiness of everything, yes, like I was saying, I do come down here every day. They can be. They can be a lot of work at the beginning. It's only when you first start that it's a lot of work. Because after the media in the filter is cycled with the bacteria, it's very simple. After that, all you have to worry about is doing a water change every week, which is 20% of the water you remove and put 20 and take whatever is been taken out, you replace it with fresh water. So if you have, let's say, a 10-gallon tank and the tank is cycled, the bacteria and the media is cycled, you would remove 2 gallons of water. And subsequently, you would replace that 2 gallons you took out with fresh water. And that dilutes any of the toxicity of the nitrate. And if you just keep doing that, that's really all you need to do at that point to keep your fish buddies alive. It's only the very beginning stages when you're adding bacteria, checking the water, and making sure everything is just so, that it can be a little difficult. And a lot of people don't understand this when they first start getting into the fish hobby. They simply think water plus fish equals happy. But that's genuinely not the case. And that's why I do these little live streams for Q&A, to try and help people learn more about the hobby and become successful fish keepers themselves. So, the squeaky chair. But, yeah. Takes a little bit of tender loving care. But it's worth it in the end. Now, our goal right now, after this tank gets cycled, is to catch a wild catfish, put it in here, because the catfish will be my dinner. Yeah, I know. I keep fish that I have for fun, but I also keep fish that I have for food. I do try and be somewhat sustainable in the way I eat my food. So yes, things that I go out and get to eat myself, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we do everything requires food, even if it's just bacteria. Bacteria requires food too. But we as living creatures, you can argue all day long with whoever about what the proper diet for a human being is. But there's something more responsible about getting your own food and being able to look your food in the face. It seems more honorable in that way. No, you guys are not bacteria. Oh yeah, in terms of what you need to know about your water online for your fish, there's generally so much information out there that it can be confusing. The only, just for the record, the only reason why I muted the two who were arguing was just to try and keep the peace. Don't worry, as long as everyone stays copacetic and chill, we'll be good. No more muting. So, anywho, yeah, every fish requires a little different parameters with their water. So knowing what parameters your fish needs before you get a fish is really important. For instance, if you get a goldfish, the biggest mistake is that people think a goldfish can live in a bowl or a tiny tank, when actually goldfish should be strictly for ponds, because they need a large amount of water. Even this 55-gallon tank is simply not big enough for a standard goldfish, because goldfish can get about this big when you actually let them grow. So you gotta do a little bit of preliminary research before you go in and get a fish. It's the same thing with betta fish. People think that betta fish can live in a tiny little confined space, when in reality betta fish love to explore, and they're actually capable of semi-complex emotions, and that's empirically studied. They can become depressed and lethargic if their tank is too small and they don't have a lot of environmental stimulation. Those who are serious aquarists will generally agree that the minimum tank size you should have for a betta fish is 10 gallons. So that way they can swim freely and have a lot of space to do stuff. Now you can have tank mates with a betta. A betta doesn't have to be alone, but your tank mates for your betta do have to be picked with some discretion. Generally, tank mates can be snails, certain types of shrimp, and sometimes other fish, so long as the other fish doesn't have big flowing fins or exotic colors. That tends to trigger bettas in a certain way to get them into a more defensive mode. Bettas are territorial, but as long as you have a 10-gallon tank, that should give them enough space for them to claim a certain part of the tank as their territory. So yeah, bettas are territorial, and the lore of bettas and where they originally came from plays a lot into how they act nowadays. They were originally taken from the rice fields in Asian countries. That's why they developed special organs to be able to breathe oxygen directly through the air, as opposed to just the water, which is why they're so hardy and why they can survive but not thrive in a small tank. It was a mechanism that they evolved in order to survive in the rice fields in Asian countries. Now, bettas have very pretty colors, so people have a tendency to, at the time, take them and keep them as pets. Now, just like there was dog fighting in certain countries, these Asian countries had betta fish fighting, and they would use it as means of gambling. And there was consequently a side effect. When you breed for an aggressive nature, sometimes that affects the adrenal glands directly, and adrenal glands can affect the pigmentation in certain animals. We know this because of the Belyaev experiment in Siberia, Russia, involving the fur industry with foxes. And I believe something similar happened to bettas. If you breed for aggressive nature, you often get more intense colors. And after the whole fish fighting scene died down, people still wanted to have them as pets, so they would breed them for the best colors, but in turn that also makes them more aggressive. That being said, there are still a very small section of the market where the lineage of the bettas do not come from breeders who bred specifically for aggressive nature, but bred for other qualities. The consequence of that is it's not as pretty of a fish. So finding them is hard. Often you'd have to import them. Oh yes, fish fighting is unfortunately very popular in low-income areas and in other countries because they're very cheap to get a hold of. They breed very heavily, and it's a form of gambling. Here in the United States, we've had to deal with dog fighting, for instance, much more high stakes sort of thing, and as you can tell by the way the law has determined about these things, it is considered animal cruelty, even if it's just fish. So, but that's essentially how betta fish came to be and how they came into the market as pet fish. But it also explains why they can be so aggressive. Yes, Michael Vick would be a prime example, or at least a more well-known example of someone who participated in the whole dogfighting circuit. But many, many years ago, centuries ago even, betta fish fighting was the primary form of lethal sport for the sort of thing. But the question remains then, can you breed betta fish to be tame? The answer is yes, you can. And the other question is, well, how reliable is it? It depends a lot on when you talk about that sort of subject. A lot of the information we know about breeding for tameness comes from the Belyaev experiments in Siberia, Russia, with the fox farm industry. As far as how well it translates to fish, we're not quite sure. But I do know that betta fish are intelligent enough to learn that certain behaviors are acceptable and some are not, through, I don't want to say Pavlovian treatment, but by stimulus-based reactions to certain behaviors. I've personally experienced this, and I do know for a fact that it is possible to keep male bettas together in the same tank, however hard it might be. It takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication and a deep understanding of how they function as fish and how their species came to be. It's generally discouraged to put males together at all. But if you know a lot about the species and you're willing to take the time, it will take a long time, because it's a lot like training a dog. In some ways, you know, some dogs learn faster than others that certain behaviors are unacceptable, and they learn by teaching them certain means. Fish can do the same thing. So, it stands to reason that you can get too aggressive fish if you treat them in a certain manner that teach them that certain behaviors are unacceptable. But you can get them to live harmoniously together. Generally, with a betta fish, it's very simple. When bettas have aggressive feelings towards each other, they will flare, and their fins will pop out, and they will make themselves look bigger. At that point, if you take something as simple as a little chopstick, and very gently just tap them on the side, nothing harmful, then they instantly stop that behavior. Eventually, the betta fish will learn that if it flares up like that and shows aggression, it'll know that that behavior is unacceptable and will stop doing it. Eventually, with enough of this training, the betta fish can learn to become more docile. So, in that respect, if you can teach both fish that and let them have a tank big enough to where they can claim their own territories, in theory, you could possibly get two male bettas to live with each other. The other way of going about it is doing all that and then breeding them, and then of the offspring, take the tamest of the offspring and breed those and keep breeding for tameness every generation. Eventually, you'll affect the genetics that control the adrenal glands, which are partly responsible for sudden and spontaneous violent behavior in certain animals. And it may cause the adrenal glands, or whatever other glands in the fish, to stop secreting hormones that make them flare up and become aggressive. So, once again, this is all a working theory, but a lot of people simply just discourage the idea of putting bettas that are males together at all. Female bettas, however, yeah, it's very complicated when you start getting into that. But on the other hand, female bettas are very different. Female bettas, for a very long time, it's been known that they can live in a sorority which means you have a large amount. It has to be odd numbers and a minimum of 5. So a minimum of 5 females. And what they do is they create a hierarchy. And there'll be the alpha all the way to the omega and everyone in between. They'll all claim certain territories. They will fight for a little bit, but nothing super serious. But the females are much, much less aggressive. The only downside is they don't have the huge flowing fins that the males do, but they're still very pretty in color. So a lot of people have sororities. As long as you keep a good eye on them, odd numbers, minimum of 5, probably at least a 20-gallon tank, you can have multiple betas in there, and they do quite well. And the girls tend to be much, much easier to handle with their aggressive nature. They're simply not as territorial as the male betas are. But yeah, that's what I've learned with beta fish. I've had 3 betas in my lifetime. Yeah, for whatever reason, it has to be an odd number, because there has to be one on top. There can't be 2 that are equal. There has to be one that is genuinely superior in terms of the pecking order. So, but that's with beta fish, and beta fish do have semi-complex emotions, and because of that, they're a little bit smarter. And did you know, beta fish, you can teach tricks like basketball. That's right, you can teach your beta fish to play basketball. It's actually not that hard. You get a little fuzzy pipe cleaner, put it on the surface of the water, and then you take a ping pong ball. And since beta fish are jumping fish anyway, if you teach them that when they boop the ball up in the air and it goes into the little pipe cleaner area, that you create a little hoop, you give them a treat. And that's how you teach your beta fish to play basketball. It's a reward system. You know, when they do something, a certain action, they do it correctly, they get a reward. So ping pong ball, fuzzy pipe cleaner on the surface of the water, they just boop it in, get a treat. Eventually they learn that if they see you and they boop the ball in the hoop, they get a treat, and they like that. Typically a bloodworm would be their treat of choice. Beta fish go nuts for bloodworms. Pretty much all fish do. So, fun facts, you know, you can genuinely play with your beta. When I had a beta fish, yeah, a lot of people start with betas because they think it's very easy and that there's minimal requirements involved. And people believe that you just get a bowl with water and put it in. But the problem is, a lot of people don't realize this. If they just fill up their water and they have municipal water from the city, that water contains either chlorine or chloramine, which chlorine poisoning will kill your fish slowly or very quickly, depending on the concentration. That is why we have special water conditioners for fish, like Seachem Prime. Seachem Prime is the golden standard of water conditioners. And that'll remove the chloramine and the chlorine and make it safe. So, as long as you do that, you're good. But a lot of people don't even know that. They just take their municipal water and throw a fish into a bunch of water that has chlorine in it, and it gives them chlorine burns on their gills and kills them slowly. And it'll make them pretty lethargic. Luckily, with my well water, I don't have to worry about that. My well water comes straight from the ground, so chlorine and chloramines are very rare, if at all, for me. So, yeah. But yes, beta fish are very intelligent. But there's other fish that are very intelligent and playful too. Goldfish koi, for instance, you can actually bottle feed a koi from a young age. And there's plenty of videos of it on YouTube. Basically, you jump in the pond with the koi, and when the koi's young, they have a bottle filled with special koi food. And the koi will come up to you and it will actually suck on the bottle like a baby does in order to get the food. And that develops a really nice relationship with you and your fish, if it's a koi fish. And the koi will get used to you. And you got to remember, koi fish can live to be over 200 years old. So your fish certain species, like koi, have a very, very capable possibility of outliving you, meaning it can be a multi-generational commitments. Interesting. A little daunting, but interesting. I believe the world's oldest koi is currently 210 or something like that, and still going strong, from what I understand. I'd have to check up and see. But yes, you can bottle feed a koi, and the nice thing is the koi fish will come up to you when you're in the pond, and you can pet them and pick them up and throw them around, and they'll come back to you. I believe you can even teach your koi to play fetch, which is fun. It's like an aquatic dog at that point, really. But my betta was very similar. My betta would let me pet his side and let me pick him up, and I play games with him all the time. But that was a long time ago when I had my betta, and that was my first fish of my own. And he's no longer with us, but he was a good little buddy, and I enjoyed him a lot. Yes, koi, goldfish, and a few other species are actually a form of carp. And carp get huge. If you ever look at a pet store, those little 10-cent feeder fish that are maybe like this big actually grow to be about this big. They get huge, which is why they're not supposed to be in a tank. They're supposed to be in a pond. Now, one of the problems we have a lot, especially with the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, is when the fish gets too big, people think they're doing the right thing by putting the fish in the lake in a natural environment. But the problem is that kind of fish is not natural to just about anywhere in the United States in local ponds or lakes and stuff. And what happens is that fish becomes so huge it outcompetes all the other fish and causes a problem. It becomes very invasive, and the Department of Natural Resources will end up putting a bounty on the fish, upwards of $3,000 in some cases, in order to get that specific fish out of there so it stops harming the ecosystem. So, do I eat fish? Oh yeah, of course. This whole tank behind me is specifically for me to put fish that I'm going to eat in so I can make sure they're disease-free before I eat them. There's currently no bounties that I know of in my area. I do work, well, I don't work, but I try and participate as much as I can alongside my local DNR. I have had to report people for doing illegal activities where I go fishing, which is unfortunate because I don't want anyone to get in trouble, but at the same time there are laws that you need to abide by. The place that I go fishing is also a designated hunting area, so a lot of times we'll see hunters out there and you'll hear shotguns going off at night, which it's not uncommon. My friends and I don't mind it, but it's when people take the goose and whatnot and leave the carcasses behind. You're not supposed to leave the carcasses behind. Can fish be vegan? That's kind of a hard question. Am I going to the Schomburg Aquatic Convention in November? I'm not quite sure yet. I'm not part of any aquatic groups yet. I want to become part of my local guppy association first, since I do breed blue Moscow guppies. But before I join the guppy association, I want to have a respectable strain of blue Moscows that I can bring to them and show them that I am a serious breeder and I have a good idea of what I'm doing. I want to make a good first impression, in other words. So I'm waiting before I join to do stuff like that. How many genders do fish have? Well, gender, let's not use that word. We'll go with the scientific biological state, which is sex. When you sex a fish, you are looking for the genitalia that defines whether it is biologically male or female. Now here's the thing. There are aquatic creatures that have 3 sexes, physically speaking, scientifically speaking, or even 4 sexes. It depends on the species of Well, in this case, I don't think it's a fish. I think it might be a squid. I'd have to look up which one in particular. But in general, most fish have a distinct male and female sex. But there are certain fish, like clownfish, that are able to change their sex based on the individual needs of the clutch of their eggs and environmental factors. So some fish are hermaphroditic in a sense that they can change their sex, but not in the sense that they can impregnate themselves. Sorry, Finding Nemo fans. But yes, there are distinct sexes between many different fish. There are some snails, for instance, like ram's horns, that are... Not going to comment on the humans ones because we're talking about fish today. As far as... Oh, shoot, I forgot what I was going to say. Hold on. Oopsies. What was I going to say? Probably something about the associations. So, I haven't gone to any of them, but I do plan on joining them eventually. So, oh, ram's horns. I'm sorry, yeah. So as far as the sexes go with ram's horn snails are hermaphroditic. And that is scientifically speaking. So they contain both male and female genitalia. Is there any way to see the tanks I have set up already? Oh yeah, I've got 5 tanks right over here to my left. I can show you that in a minute. But really quick, yes, ram's horns are hermaphroditic, and they can, in rare cases, impregnate themselves in order to reproduce. However, it does generally form some sort of genetic deficiency. Can fish have hair? It's a good question. I can't pick any fish off of hand that have hair. Can fish crossbreed with other things? Well, there are some species of fish that can crossbreed with other species of fish to create special fish, kind of like a tiger and a lion can make a liger, but the offspring will be sterile. So you won't be able to breed the offspring, making it unique and expensive, but you won't be able to get more of them. So there are instances like that. But as far as breeding with something completely off base of what a fish is, scientifically speaking, as far as I know, no. It has to be within the same genus, I believe, in order for it to happen, if at all. So, anywho, so we've looked at the 55. We've tested the water parameters. It's not cycled yet. It's going to take a while. In this case, generally, I'm thinking about 2 to 3 weeks. And we're going to look at the other tanks as per the request. Do fish have testicles? I don't believe they have testicles, but it all depends on the species of fish. Live-bearing fish will inseminate the females directly, much like humans do. And then there are other fish that are egg-laying fish, where the females will lay their eggs, and the males will release like spermatospores all over the place, and if the spermatospores hit the eggs, it'll impregnate, or the egg in that case, and the egg will have enough food for the baby inside the egg to grow. So, once again, it depends heavily on the species of fish, and there are so many of them that it's almost impossible to go over them all. I specialize in a few different species of fish. Not a lot, but just the ones that I particularly breed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera around, and I'm going to show you guys, because someone asked about my other tanks. These are my 10-gallon tanks. So the one on the bottom right is full of dream blue velvet shrimp. The one on the top right is full of pumpkin orange shrimp. The one on the top left is full of baby blue Moscow guppies and my puffer fish. And the one on the bottom left is full of neon yellow shrimp. And the big 40 breeder on this side, this is a 40-gallon tank. This is where I have my blue Moscow guppies. The right side has the females that are having babies, and the left side has the males that are the result of those babies growing up. There's also 2 bushy-nosed plecos, one on each side because the sides are divided. I have bushy-nosed plecos in there because they're small enough so that they don't take up a lot of space and create too much bioload, but they do keep the glass clean. So I keep them in there for that. Yes, the males stay on the left side, females stay on the right side, except for the males that I use to breed with the females. Can I keep blue velvets and mystery shrimp in a 29-gallon breeder? Well, the fact of the matter is, Neocardinia davidi shrimp, which is the species specifically, which is the only species of shrimp that I breed, whether it's cherry, pumpkin, blue dream velvet, blue velvet, what have you, they can go in tanks as small as a single gallon. I have a 2.5 gallon right next to my bed that I have that's just for fun. Whenever I can't fall asleep, I just watch my shrimp do shrimpy things. And yeah, so small invertebrates can definitely go together. If you met mystery snails, yeah, mystery snails are totally fine to keep with shrimp. They're both very peaceful creatures. No, you don't jam the fish into each other. I know you're trying to be funny here, but the fish jam into each other themselves. Let's put it like that. So that would be my Dream Blue Velvet tank. And they like to just kind of swim around and do their thing. Man, every time I hear this chair squeak, I think to myself, WD-40. I gotta get some WD-40. It rained fish where you live. Well, believe it or not, it's not uncommon to hear about the skies raining fish. Generally, it happens after a tornado or during a tornado. What happens is the tornado goes over a body of water, and being a funnel cloud, it sucks things from the bottom up. And it becomes a tornado. It starts out as a tornado, and as it goes over the body of water, it becomes what's known as a water spout. The water spout contains water in a spiraling formation that unfortunately does tend to pick up a lot of sea creatures or water life from whatever body of water it goes in, and it flings them very far. And that's how you end up having fish raining from the sky. They didn't come from the sky, but they were unlucky enough to be flung up there. So that answers that question for the most part. Have I ever thought of breeding neons? Well, the thing about let's put it like this. I have a particular set of things that I breed because of the water that I have. I have to work with what I've got. And because I use hard water directly from my well, I stick with fish that do very well in hard water. So live-bearing fish, in other words, fish that give live birth, they don't lay eggs, do require hard water because they need the electrolytes and minerals in order to survive just in general. And blue Moscow guppies, or any guppies for that matter, are live-bearing fish. So they do very well with hard water. The same goes for invertebrates. Invertebrates need the calcium in the water for their exoskeletons, and snails need the calcium for their shells. So I figured the best thing to breed, if I'm going to breed for profit, would be creatures that require the water or what's in the water that I already have. It just so happens that blue Moscow guppies, red Moscow guppies, grass guppies, etc. are a much more exotic variation of a common species, which is why they cost a bit more. Now, the fish I have, they do very well in the hard water. As you can see, they swim around and they do as they do. They're happy. And even my puffer fish does a very good job in the water. In fact, why don't we say hi to little Poof, my puffer fish. Close that for insulation. Always got to insulate the tanks. Oopsies. Drop the battery. So, this is my fry tank. These are where all the baby blue Moscow guppies go. Because mama fish, the females, will eat the babies, so I have to scoop them out. And you can see there's a lot of babies swimming around. Once they become a certain age where I can determine their sex, then they'll be scooped out and put in the respective sides in the 40-gallon tank instead of this 10-gallon tank. Now, little Poof is my pea puffer, and he is one of the, if not the smallest species of puffer fish that you can get, and is a freshwater puffer. And there's little Poof. She is swimming around. She's kind of hard to spot, but there she is right in the center. She's coming out. She's coming out to play. Are each of my tanks different temperatures? Yes, as a matter of fact, they are. Blue Moscow guppies, or guppies in general, have a very bad immune system. So, because of that, they get sick very easily. In order to help combat any sicknesses they might come across or develop, I have to keep the temperature of any tank with guppies in it really high. So the fry tank is at 82.3 degrees Fahrenheit, but over when they're adults, I keep it at 85 degrees. This helps prevent fin rot, fungal diseases, and ick. So as long as they keep the temperatures nice and warm, for these particular fish, they won't develop any diseases. I did have a small outbreak of fin rot in the 40-degree tank for a little bit, but after upping the temperature, their immune systems kicked back in, and with a little help from Melifix, they were able to fight off the infection, and they're all in the recovery stage or have been completely recovered from the fin rot. But the shrimp tanks are a bit different. Shrimp really arguably don't even need the heater as long as it's room temperature, around 70 degrees or so. The only reason I have heaters in the shrimp tanks are for when I do water changes. The water that comes out of the well directly from my hose is pretty cold. So when I put it in there, I want to make sure the temperature comes back up to an acceptable temp before, or so they're not freezing. No, the infections that fish experience are not transmittable to humans, generally speaking. These are not fish that I'm eating. These are just fish for aquarium use for fun. So as long as you're not eating them, you wouldn't get any sickness from them. Yep. Glad to have you stop by. You're always welcome to stop by and say hi and ask whatever questions you like. So, another person said they like fried shrimp. I have to agree. Fried shrimp is probably one of my favorite. But if I had to choose a particular favorite, I would say coconut butterfly shrimp. I'd say that is the tastiest. However, these little guys are far too small to really eat. Unless maybe you're a puffer fish. Isn't that right, little Poof? I don't know if you can see her, but she's right there swimming around. Being a goofy Poof. But yeah. That's, excellent question. So you're asking if one fish gets sick, does it spread to the other fish? The answer is maybe. It depends on the particular infection. Things like ick, fin rot, and think there's one other. I think fungal infections can spread. So generally speaking, if one fish gets sick in a tank with a bunch of other fish, you have to treat the entire tank. Most of the time, though, medicine is not actually required in order to treat an illness. For instance, ick is a parasite that only affects fish with scales. So, in order to get rid of it, you can raise the temperature to a reasonably warm temperature, around 85 degrees, and that's actually hot enough to kill the ick, but not the fish. So that will get rid of the ick, and then it'll fall off of the scales. At that point, you just use your siphon hose that you use to clean the tanks, and you vacuum out all the dead ick. And over time, all the fish will get rid of it, and their immune systems will rebound and come back, and it will help fight off the infection. The U.S. Post-Hart-Celler Act. Well, I can't say I have an educated opinion about that. Thoughts on sand versus gravel substrate. Well, it's important to remember that there are different levels of sand and different levels of gravel. I use sand in all my tanks, and even though it's sand, it's very thick sand. And I chose very thick sand with a heavy weight because it'll fall down to the ground immediately, just like gravel. There are much more fine versions of sand that have tiny, tiny granules that, if kicked up, will take time to settle back down. Ultimately, it depends on what species of fish you're keeping. If you have something like a Plecostomus, or pleco for short, they tend to kick up a lot of stuff around when they swim about on the ground. So it's better to have a quicker falling sand, which means it's generally thicker and weighs heavier than normal sand granules. But if you have fish that stay primarily above the water line, or above the mid-level of the tank, like angelfish, they generally don't go to the bottom of the tank anyway, and at that point, you don't have to worry so much about it. As far as gravel goes, gravel is just simply easier to deal with, but it's totally optional. As far as vacuuming sand, yes, if it's a fine gravel sand that doesn't settle very quickly, it can be a pain to deal with. What I'm going to do, actually, what I can do for you is we're going to put the camera right here. You're going to see the sand. I'm going to put my hand in here, and I'm going to show you what heavy sand looks like. So I have heavy sand. See how it falls down to the ground immediately? That makes vacuuming very easy, because then it doesn't really get sucked up in the vacuum. If you have fine sand, it won't fall down nearly as quickly. And because of that, it can get sucked up through the siphon, causing a bit of annoyance when trying to clean. But generally, the trick is with sand, when you have your siphon coming in, you try to come in at an angle. So that way you get water coming in halfway and sand only in the bottom. And this sand isn't special. This sand is actually, well, this one is from National Geographic. You could probably use that. There's a lot of different sand types you can get. This is from National Geographic, but all the other sand, which is the exact same thing essentially, is from Petco. This is Petco brand sand, and it falls to the ground just as quickly. It's very easy to maintain. It functions a lot like gravel for the most part, and aesthetically speaking, it's very nice. I like it much more than gravel. So for that reason, I would say Petco brand sand does a good job. It's pH neutral, so it will not affect your pH. And it's very cheap because it's their own brand. So one 25-pound bag filled up all these aquariums, these 4 10-gallons. Yep, happy to help. So yeah, sand is not out of reach for most people. Yeah, National Geographic does do a good job, but I will say this, some of their stuff is a bit overpriced. Of course, it all depends on where you're shopping. Pet stores definitely mark up their prices, mainly to cover overhead costs. So I do a lot of my shopping on Amazon. But yeah, that's more or less the live stream for today, guys. I've gone over the tanks, and I've gone over the main thing that I wanted to talk about today, which I'm going to turn the camera around here, which is the 55-gallon that I'm cycling at the moment. So this will take some time. When this is fully cycled, my friend and I are going to go fishing. And I'm the bait wrangler. I'm very good at picking up crayfish out of the water. Just for reference, anytime you do anything with a crayfish in your local waters, make sure the type of you know what species of crayfish you're dealing with. Where I live, we have rusty crayfish, which are not supposed to be in this state. Unfortunately, they are. Yeah, I probably will make a video about the fishing trip. The only problem is we go fishing at 2 in the morning because that is the best time to get crayfish and catfish and bass and what have you. So I don't exactly know how we're going to film it, but I'm going to try. I live in Illinois, and we have some pretty interesting stuff here. But, gosh, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Well, we're going to do it, and we're going to go fishing, and this tank, when it's fully cycled, will be holding a catfish. Yeah, the lighting out there can be pretty bad, but on the good side of things, the camera here does have its own built-in light, so we can kind of see what we're doing, but kind of not. We'll have to experiment a little bit, so as far as filming goes, but I'm doing more and more live streaming, mainly because after I hit 10,000 subscribers, YouTube gives their creators a feature to live stream directly through the app. So that's why I've only recently started doing live streams. But I really enjoy doing live streams because they get to interact with people directly. So, but yes, this will be holding a catfish, and the catfish will be my food. And oh, I remember what I was saying. Dealing with specific species, like over here we have a lot of invasive species. One of them is the crayfish I eat all the time, which are rusty crayfish. They're not supposed to be here, but they are here. And because of that, the laws that surround them are very, very strict. Thank you. There was so much calcium on this tank. Oh my goodness. But vinegar, just 5% acidity white vinegar on a sponge. Cleaned it up very easily. That video I showed was nowhere near as nasty as this originally was. My friend did a terrible job with this tank, but I cleaned it up. But anywho, the rusty crayfish has a lot of laws surrounding it because they're an invasive species. They don't want people taking the crayfish with them as bait to another area of water. Well, invasive species, invasive fish. I mean, in this case, we're talking about fish. I'm sure there are invasive species of other sorts. But particularly, the waterways are harder to control than other things. So, the rusty crayfish, people take them and they use them as live bait. It works very well. The problem is, because it works so well, they'll catch these little guys and then they'll keep them. and then they go to other bodies of water where maybe rusty crayfish aren't ever there. And then at the end of the day when they're done fishing, if they haven't used them all, they'll just dump them off the boat. And then suddenly, now there's another body of water with invasive species. In this case, an invasive species of crayfish. The rusty crayfish has single-handedly decimated about 20 or so different native Illinois crayfish species, which is really unfortunate. But the thing about it is, I have been personally granted permission from the Department of Natural Resources conservation officers to legally collect them and stock them in my tanks for the sole purpose of consumption, meaning that I'm going to eat them. That is something that is rarely ever given to the public or anyone in general. And anytime I do anything involving a species of any sort of fish or sea life that I've never seen before, I make sure to contact my conservation officers in my region to ensure what I'm doing is legal. And that's really important because if I had never contacted them about it, I would have never have known. I actually don't need a license for having an invasive species. I do still need a fishing license because whether I go fishing or not, if I'm just wrangling up bait, it's still important because that $20-some that goes towards that license goes directly to the DNR to help them with their conservation efforts to ensure that invasive species don't overwhelm parts of the ecosystem. Because if we just let them go unchecked, they're going to take over everything and just destroy everything. And good fishing spots will become terrible. We're already seeing really bad results from rusty crayfish, round gobies, basket clams. There's no Asian carp in my area that I see, but the aquatic biologists at the DNR begged me that if I had, well, I shouldn't say begged, but strongly worded that if I ever see an Asian carp in the waters where I'm at, please report it, because they are insanely invasive. They are the type of, these are the fish that jump up out of the water when boats come by and flop you and hit you straight across the face because they just jump up like that. They're Asian carp. They're not supposed to be in these waters. It's really incredible how these invasive species even get in the water in the first place. I bet you would never guess how the rusty crayfish got in Illinois. Funny story. So, yeah, those fish are wacky, but funny story with the rusty crayfish. They are native to certain states closer towards the center of the United States. What happened was the educational system, meaning like public schools, in elementary school, I think in 3rd or 4th grade, they have biology class, and a lot of schools have a crayfish as a class pet to learn about biology. So what the school does is they order crayfish from a supplier so that they have a pet that they can study. Unfortunately, there was a distributor who illegally distributed rusty crayfish across state lines, and they're not allowed to do that. But the problem is the teachers don't know every type of species of crayfish. And what happened is at the end of the year, the class pet is still alive. And all the children don't want to see their now little buddy die. So the teacher thinks they're doing the humane and right thing by releasing the crayfish back into the wild. The problem is this particular crayfish was never in that area before. And this particular crayfish is much more aggressive, much more spunky, and much more capable of fending off other species of crayfish for resources. So, unfortunately, the public school system is to blame for having these invasive crayfish where I'm at. Consequently, there's also other situations like the round goby. I did also have a round goby that he was affectionately named Toby the Goby. We had him for a little bit. The only reason I had a round goby was because I was trying to catch a crayfish in a trap, and I used bacon. I'm like, all right, I'll try bacon to catch a crayfish. And I pulled the trap in, and sure enough, there was something in there, but it wasn't crayfish. It was these other fish that I had never seen before. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to bring them home. I'm going to go on the internet, show pictures to people, and have them ID them. Ah, yeah. We always we never had that opportunity in my school system. We weren't allowed class pets, unfortunately. But biology classes are important. But the round goby. Yeah, we had Toby the goby. That's what I called him. Toby goby sounds like a great name for a goby, right? So I brought him home to identify him to see what species he was, and that's the only reason he was ever in one of my tanks. When I found out what he was and how bad he is for the ecosystem, I got very concerned because they are like predator number one in terms of invasive species in the area. So the round gobies actually came from Asian countries. Since we import more stuff to America than we export, Asian countries where they're where they're native, not invasive, at ports they will fill their ballast tanks with water. And unfortunately, when they fill the water with the ballast tanks, some of the fish got sucked in with it as well. And then when the ship made its transcontinental voyage from Asia over to the United States, it brought the fish along in the ballast tanks. And when they released the ballast tanks, the fish came out as well. Now, the round goby is an incredibly robust fish. It had no problem surviving the trip, and once it got its foothold in the United States, it quickly became a severe problem. To this day, I do believe that the DNR has a kill-on-sight law, meaning if you catch a round goby, you are legally obligated, at least where I live, to kill the goby immediately. That's how bad it is. You are not allowed to release them. They want the population of round gobies reduced as best they can. And that includes educating other fellow anglers and bait wranglers on how to identify these species and educate them on the laws about them to ensure they don't contribute to the problem. So there's a lot of laws with these different types of invasive species in the water that I have to be aware of, so that way I don't do anything bad or against the law. Well, let me read that question a little better. Well, in terms of getting rid of, what I mean is the law states that for things like round gobies that if you catch it, you must kill it. That doesn't apply to every fish. Like catfish or a bigmouth bass, those kinds of fish are native to the area. They're common, and that's where they belong, is in this area. You can catch and release those. Those are perfectly fine. But an invasive species is essentially a type of, let's say fish in this case, that was never in that ecosystem to begin with. Somehow was introduced to the ecosystem by means of accident, generally, or some other bizarre way, and is now posing a threat to all these species that are native to the area, sucking up resources. Yes, snakeheads are a good example. Snakeheads down south, I believe, are kill on sight as well. They are very, very invasive in that area. But keyword invasive, like I said, all depends on where you live. The rusty crayfish in the Bible Belt of the United States is not invasive, so you don't have to worry about them there. But up here in Illinois, they are invasive. They're not supposed to be here. But yes, there's a lot of stuff like that when you're dealing with fish that are wild, you have to be aware of. Now, there's also other things like stocking fish. Like, can you legally stock a wild fish in your tank? That's another legal thing you have to consider. And when I was talking to the conservation officers about rusty crayfish, they asked, well, why aren't you just eating them right away? Why are you putting them in a tank to keep them alive? And I had to tell them, well, I need to make sure they're disease-free because they are coming from the wild. And I don't want to get sick, so I monitor them for about 2 to 3 weeks, and I flavor them up with frozen sweet peas so that their meat tastes a little better. And this allows me to make sure they don't have fungal infections or other sorts of diseases that might get me sick if I consume them, which, makes sense. Yeah, even if it's for food. Invasive species have very strict laws because the way they see it is if someone were to call in that they saw you had a tank full of an invasive species, and someone were to call it in, the officers might come into your house and say, well, we think you're breeding these things and then selling them as bait, which is illegal because these are invasive. And if you are caught doing something like that, conservation officers actually have more legal power in this case than standard police officers. If they have reason to believe you are doing something illegal with, let's say, a rusty crayfish, they can take all of your fish tanks, they will kill all of anything that is in your fish tanks, they will take away your right, or not your right, but your license to fish, and they will ban you from being able to get a new one. There was someone who was fishing and snagging far too many salmon in one place, and he broke the law severely by doing what he was doing. They confiscated his boat, his truck, his fishing equipment, his license, his right to ever get a license again. I mean, he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. So that's why I always talk to the conservation officers, and it's very important that I do so because I want them to know who I am, and I want to know who they are, so that they know I'm a good guy. They basically told me the law is 0 possession. But for me, they said, for you, we will give you this exception because you're essentially doing us a favor by getting them out of the water. We don't want them in the water, and you're getting them out and at least doing something productive with them. Someone who is going to commit a crime with them is not going to ask permission to commit that crime. I'm asking permission to do something which is generally not allowed, but under certain provisions is allowed if you are granted permission. And that is if. And you have to ask first. So it's important to do so. That's how I avoid legal trouble, because my blue Moscow guppies would never be invasive. They're tropical fish. They would die in the cold water. My shrimp are the same way. But if you were to have cherry shrimp shipped over to Hawaii, they might be considered invasive there, because in Hawaii they have tropical waters, and they might survive, and they might reproduce very quickly and become a problem. So there's certain species of shrimps and stuff that you can't ship to some places. Lionfish, for instance, is a great example. Over on, I believe it's the East Coast, on the East Coast near Florida, lionfish have come from somewhere, we're not entirely sure where, and they're very pretty to look at. They're beautiful looking fish, but they are insanely invasive there, to the point where the DNR is specifically training people on trying to figure out a way to deal with them. However, over here in Illinois, they are not considered an invasive species and are actually sold as pets. I don't know if lionfish are kill on sight, but I would imagine that they would be. I do hear, though, that lionfish taste very nice. A lot of people do kill them and eat them because they're tasty. Now, lionfish are venomous, not poisonous, venomous. So if you get stung by the barbs on your hands, it's going to hurt really bad. Yeah, lionfish are the ones that are in Florida that are super invasive. But here in Illinois, even at pet stores, they sell them as pets because lionfish are tropical fish. They require the salty marine water that is tropical temperatures to survive. If you were to throw a lionfish into Illinois wild waters, one, it wouldn't have the salt that they would need for the electrolytes to survive, and two, the water would be far too cold and would simply shock and kill them. So that's why we can have them as pets here in Illinois, and it's not a problem. If someone were to release it in the wild, it would just die, simply because of its own biology. Yeah, that's one that got me, is they are very... they're not poisonous, they're venomous. Poison is a toxin for if you consume, like a pufferfish. Venom is something that is injected. They have venomous spines all over their body. And actually, Brave Wilderness did a video on the lionfish. You should totally check it out. Brave Wilderness, man, Coyote Peterson is such an awesome guy to watch do everything he does. He showed the effects of what happens when you get stung by a lionfish. It's pretty unpleasant to be stung like that. Haha, yes, another person who watches it. I've never been stung by anything poisonous. As a matter of fact, I've never even been stung by a bee or a wasp. And trust me, there's plenty of those little buggers around here, for sure. I don't know how I've been so lucky in life as to never been stung by anything. Let's hope it stays that way. I don't want to get stung. That would genuinely stink. Ugh. But I generally don't deal with venomous creatures. That being said, I don't know if my little pufferfish is technically poisonous. Knock on wood. There's my wood right there. This is actually wood. This is all metal, and this is like industrial wood. So, there's the knocking on wood. Let's hope it does something for me. Because, yeah. But I tell you, one of my dreams is to go through scuba diving school, which actually, the town over from me, actually there is a school for scuba diving. It's pretty expensive, but maybe one day, you never know, right? And here's the best thing about getting your diver's license. The Shed Aquarium is in Chicago, which really isn't too far from me. It's a bit of a drive, but, you know, attainable nevertheless. And if you get your diver's license, you can apply for a program to help clean up the tanks. Meaning you get to put on the diver's suit, hop in the tank with all the big fish, and get to swim around with them and, you know, volunteer to help clean the place up a little bit. I think everyone wins, because who wouldn't want to swim with a bunch of really awesome tropical fish? I mean, it sounds really fun. And I actually, my friend who works at a Petco, well, more of an acquaintance, but I consider him a friend. He and I talk a lot. He's got a nice Fahaka puffer. He's in the DNR. He's actually going to the East Coast to study lionfish as part of his training for the DNR, and he is also going to the Shed Aquarium as part of his training for the DNR, which is pretty awesome. I mean, that's some pretty hands-on work right there. The most I do is a little bit of citizen science. If I notice something odd, I report it, but beyond that, there's not much else I do. Shark cages. What I do in a shark cage? Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. You have to know what kind of shark you're dealing with, and the shark cage needs to be built properly. There's been a number of incidents where the shark cages were not built up to the correct specifications, and things get a little hairy, and stuff happens. But fact of the matter is, sharks really don't have a lot of interest in human beings. We're not really part of the list of things that they like to eat. And yeah, you're right, it does sound scary, but if you think about it, a lot of things are really only scary when you don't know much about them, because it's the lack of knowledge about them that makes them scary. Yeah, they're big, they're huge, and they have sharp teeth, and they're carnivorous, But even a fish has preference, or a shark in this case has a preference on what it does and doesn't want to eat. If they see a human, they're like, I don't know what that is. I'd rather eat the stuff I'm used to eating. Sharks are very curious creatures, so they will come up to the tank and, kind of bump around, because the way they sense things in the water is a little different than some other aquatic life. But as long as everything's built right, everything should be fine. And yes, you can catch sharks. You're right, yeah. Oh, my friend and I have a plan to go out on a boat somewhere nice in Indiana, I believe. And, coral. It is not illegal to have coral. However, it must be coral that is cultured and grown artificially. You are not allowed to take coral from nature. Coral reefs are the main grounds for the bulk of many tropical fish for where they live and breed in the wild, but the number of coral has gone down significantly over the years due to a lot of stuff because of humans. That's why coral is considered more of an endangered kind of creature, because coral is actually a culmination of living creatures. So you can have coral in your saltwater tanks. It just has to be grown by someone and not taken from the wild. So someone has something like a coral that's grown, and eventually it grows up and it splits off because it reproduces. And when it splits off, then you have two pieces of coral. And you can have one and sell the other. So as long as it's done like that, it's completely legal. But if you take it from nature, from the bodies of water that the fish in the wild are living in, that is very, very much so illegal. Like usual, it really depends on how you go about doing things. And coral is one of the more tricky ones. Well, actually, it's not really that tricky. It's just don't take coral from the wild, buy it from someone who grows it. That's pretty much how it is. Saltwater tanks, I've thought about it, but saltwater tanks really aren't all that much harder to take care of. They do require slightly different equipment and a little more equipment and better monitoring. But I think the main factor for saltwater, for me for not going saltwater, is simply because, financially speaking, it is a much bigger investment. That being said, one of my favorite fishes to ever exist was a saltwater pufferfish. His name was Titan. Titan the pufferfish over at Pets Etc. Unfortunately, I'm sad to report Titan passed away a few months ago at the ripe old age of 15. But Titan was a shining example of just how playful and loving a fish can be, because he was about this big, and he loved people. He would come to the front of the tank, he would look at you, he would wiggle and look crazy. I've got a video of him. One of the things I do with the crayfish that I catch is I would go to the pet store and they would let me feed him wild crayfish, because that's one of the things he would eat on his own in nature. So giving that was a huge treat for him. And a lot of fish are able to recognize their owners and people that they like. So whenever I came around, he would go nuts because he knew I was going to give him a crayfish. And he was just so playful, and he's the kind of puffer that you really think you could pet. And he's the kind of puffer you look at him and he's swimming around, and he's just so happy. It's like, if I could just jump in the tank and hug him, I probably would. Oh yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. Well, as far as how big they get, depending on how much food they require, generally speaking, there's a very simple concept that explains it. The bigger the engine, the more fuel you need. So, arguably speaking, yes, a fish when it's younger doesn't need as much food as when it's older, but I couldn't really say for sure because I don't have a lot of species that are very big. As you can see, or as I was showing you before, the guppies are really the only fish that I breed. And they're pretty small fish. They do like treats once in a while. But I would say when they're young, they don't require a lot of food. In fact, when they're young, they can simply pick at the algae that builds on the wall, and that's enough to sustain them. When they're older, though, they do need more food in order to keep them going. So I think there's probably a logical sense to it that the bigger the fish, the more food it needs. That being said, it is very easy to overfeed a fish. A fish's stomach is generally as big as its eyeball. So, with that kind of baseline to go with, I would say, you know, even just a pinch of fish flakes is enough to feed all my blue Moscow males. And with the females, though, they require a little bit more protein in their diet because they are having babies all the time. Yeah. Their stomachs are about as big as their eyeballs. That's the general consensus for most fish. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but for sure that is the general idea. Shrimp is even more different. Shrimp, in small numbers, don't even need you to feed them. They'll just pick at the biofilm that builds up naturally and eat that. It's only when shrimp get in large numbers that they pick off all the biofilm and there's none left that you have to supplement their diet. So that's why I have special veggie pellets that I feed them that are super high in calcium and full of tons of other vegetables to help with their exoskeletons, color, and all that good stuff. Helps them grow up nice and strong and healthy. But when they're very young, they don't pay attention to it. They just pick on the biofilm that just grows naturally. But anywho, it's getting a little late now, but hey, thanks for stopping by, guys. It's always a pleasure to speak to everyone live and just answer fishy questions. I may even schedule a time to talk with some of the people at my favorite fish stores live. There are some places that they have no problem with me filming live or anything like that because they do a very good job cleaning their tanks and making sure their fish are healthy. So I know some of the managers and general managers that work at some of these fish stores due to business relationships, and for them, they see it as a great way to get exposure for their business, and for me, it's a great way to help answer questions and maybe on subjects that I don't know much about, because as far as saltwater goes, definitely not as educated on saltwater as I'd like to be. But yes, so yeah, thanks for stopping in, guys. This is my new mascot, by the way. It's a shrimp. I call him Sammy the Shrimp. He's gonna be down here. He's just a little goofy toy that I imported from Japan because it's the same species of shrimp that I breed. So I think whenever you see the thumbnail with Sammy the Shrimp, it'll be a live stream involving fish talk. So I'll try to make that a standard so that way when you look at the thumbnail you know, oh, it's a fishing stream or it's something to do with fish. Because I have been doing live streams about a few other random stuff that really isn't all that important. Awesome, man. Glad to have you as a sub. But yeah, sometimes I do live streams on stuff that have nothing to do with fish, and the main reason I do that is because I'm testing out equipment and whatnot. How often do I hold live streams? It's totally random at this point. I really should have a schedule for like everything that I do. I'm one of those guys where as soon as there's an opportunity, I kind of just go for it. Videos, it's not that big of a deal. Live streams, I should definitely have something planned. But if I have something special planned, I'll generally make a short video about it and explain what I'm planning to do and when I'm planning to do it. So that way everyone knows ahead of time. But yes, if you see Sammy the Shrimp, you know in the thumbnail, you know it's going to be a video about fish. If you don't see Sammy the shrimp, it's probably something different, and I'm probably just realistically testing out different equipment. Because, for instance, this live stream should have had better quality because I switched the frequency that I use to connect to my wireless access point down here so that I don't have a bad connection. I also, as you can see, I'm not holding the phone to do the live stream. I also got a tripod attachment to hold my phone so that way I can do more stuff during the live stream without being constrained. And I've also got a special big battery bank that powers the phone to ensure I don't lose power. So I'm doing live streams more often, trying to get into that. I'm still pretty new to it, so may have to bear with me for a little bit. And every once in a while, I guess we have some wacky people come in here and do some weird stuff like you saw earlier. But we'll find a way to deal with that at some point. People are people. Anywho, signing off. Have a good one, everyone. I'll see you next time. Stay fishy.